Welcome, everyone. My name is Carmen Mazzara, and I serve as Executive Director of APSIA, the Association of Professional Schools of International Affairs. APSIA is the community for all of the graduate schools worldwide that specialize in international affairs, and we're so happy to be able to share content like this with you to help talk to you about all of the many different professional opportunities that are available for those of you who are out studying and mastering so many different elements of our wonderful, complicated, weird, special world that we live in. We are particularly delighted to be joined today by Julie Weintraub from the United Nations Young Professionals Program, who's going to talk to you about this exciting and amazing opportunity. We will have a recording of this presentation up on the APSIA YouTube page afterwards. It will join the recordings of all the other career webinars that we have done. So after this opportunity, if there's other things you'd like to explore, I encourage you to check out our YouTube page and that playlist. And I also encourage you to stay very much in touch with your career services office at your APSIA school to learn about other upcoming exciting events that we're having. And so with that, I want to thank Julie for being here and turn the floor over to her for her wisdom. Julie.
Thank you so much, Carmen. It's always great being here with the APSIA schools. So as Carmen said, my name is Julie Weintraub. I am a Human Resources Officer at the United Nations Secretariat based in New York. And I'm going to be talking to you about the Young Professionals Program today, and then also some other entry points for talent into the UN. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Bear with me 1 second while I see it popping up. And then we'll go into presentation. All right, so I'm going to be relying on Carmen and Brianna to help me out here if anything comes up in the chat, any questions, but please do feel free to ask away in the chat, and I'm happy to kind of pause as we go through. But so we're going to be talking about Young Professionals Program, but also about the UN Secretariat and entry points. So I don't expect you to be able to tell what is in this slide at all, but I like putting it up here just to show the really the complexities of the United Nations and to help kind of manage expectations a little bit about what we're talking about when we talk about the United Nations Secretariat and the Young Professionals Program. So there are many different funds and agencies and programs all within the UN Common System, as we call it. You'll have heard of UNICEF and World Bank and FAO. All of those are part of the UN Common System, but really from what we'll be focusing on today with the UN Secretariat, it's a more localized, or kind of the governing body of the UN. So the Secretariat has all of the departments and offices on the bottom of this in yellow. So it's where the Secretary General is, Office of Department of Operational Support, many different offices within the Secretariat, including regional commissions globally and UN Habitat as well. So there's kind of a limited number of organizations that consist of the Secretariat, as opposed to everything that you have heard of that is the UN is not necessarily part of the Secretariat, but part of the common system. And so this chart can be found on the UN website if you want to kind of dig a little bit deeper and wrap your head around what is part of the UN common system and what is more closely part of the UN Secretariat. But with that said, you know, when you think about the United Nations and what we do, really the main arms of the organization are focused on peace and security, human rights, humanitarian aid, and all of that really now is done under the umbrella of the Sustainable Development Goals. So as you go forward on your journey, hopefully correctly in familiarizing yourself with the United Nations, you really want to make sure that you are also familiarizing yourself with what we do and really how we do it with the Sustainable Development Goals. So these 17 goals are always a key part of the work done, regardless what area you're focused on at the UN. We use these goals to really help, as it says here, tackle global challenges. And then kind of zooming in a little bit further, recognizing that the UN Secretariat is an international organization in the same right as many, many, many other international organizations. There are many different fields of work that are done. So we don't want to give the impression that it's just peace and security and humanitarian efforts. Those types of roles all fit under POLNET that you see here, these job networks that describe the work that's done in the UN and contain all of the job families. So there's also MAGNET, which is all of our management and administration job families. So human resources, for example, would be in MAGNET. So any type of work that you can imagine is done in the UN. So when you're thinking about your long-term career, you can think about the UN and the UN Secretariat as you would for other organizations to find many different types of roles. Not going to go into the details of all of these job networks here, but just something to keep in mind that any type of job that you are looking for likely does exist at the UN. All right, so then I want to just kind of talk a little bit more about other entry points into the UN before we dive into my program, the Young Professionals Program. There's a lot of complexities about trying to look for a job at the UN, so I want to try and maybe help clear up what some acronyms are and help drive your search a little bit better. But so when you go to careers.un.org and try searching for a job on the UN page, you'll see that it asks you to select a level. And so we have these categories of professional and higher positions, general service and related, as well as field service. And selecting those categories are going to help narrow in your search. And to help you better understand the professional and higher, these types of roles require typically at least 2 years of experience and up. So you see on the bottom, we have the little table of the years of experience that are required for the different professional level roles. They also typically require at least a master's degree or advanced degree. There are typically conditions where if you have more years of service, more years of experience, then a bachelor's level degree can suffice. But typically at least a master's is required for that professional and higher level. And then when we're looking at the general service and related, those are roles that only require actually a high school level degree, and they are more support roles. And then field service is kind of cuts across the support and professional, but is specific to a field mission, as opposed to the professional and higher positions. They're what we call international roles. So you can move anywhere across the Secretariat. So I'm sure I didn't clarify absolutely everything about the different categories at the UN, but just know when you are looking in your search that you'll need to kind of make these decisions. And most likely, since we're talking about graduate programs here, you're going to look at the professional and higher level positions. So there are, beyond the Young Professionals Program, which we'll get to in just a second, there are other kind of centralized programs or entry points into the United Nations that you might want to consider and read up more about. So if you have skills in languages and to such a degree that you could serve as an interpreter, translator, editor. There's a special set of competitive exams that are specific for language professionals. So you would be able to find that on the careers page as well. And then we do have what's called United Nations Volunteers, which is outside of Secretariat, but UNV actually operates across the UN Common System. Basically, you would apply with UNV, let them know that you want to serve as a volunteer. You would go through an assessment process with them, and then they would help place volunteers across the common system. Something to note about the UN volunteers is actually that there is a stipend, so individuals are paid a certain amount to serve as a volunteer. There is also online or virtual volunteering, which of course is more common these days, but it used to be a pretty nice perk that was not done very often. So something you might want to visit unv.org just to read up more about opportunities through them. There's also the Junior Professional Officer, the JPO program. There are certain countries or member states, as we refer to them at the UN, that sponsor individuals to work at the UN. And so you can find more out about the Junior Professional program on UN. I would just do a search for Junior Professional Officer. You can find out if your country sponsors JPOs. There are also some countries that sponsor individuals from less developed countries, even if you are not a national of that specific sponsoring country. Not going to get into the details on that. I really couldn't if I wanted to, but just know that that is an opportunity, and you might want to just do some research on that on your own. And then there are some other short-term opportunities if you're interested in just getting a taste for what it's like at the UN without a big commitment. There are temporary job openings, which could last anywhere from 2 or 3 months up to just under a year for the regulations. And you would search for those on the careers page, just as you would for any other role. You would just take note of where it says temporary or TJO for temporary job opening, as opposed to like a fixed term role. There are also consultants and individual contractors. Again, those consultancies are advertised on careers.un.org as well, as are the internship opportunities posted on careers.un.org. All of these, when you go to select professional and hire, for example, we talked about before, you would select internship or consultancy. You just want to make sure that you're aware of kind of which pull downs you're selecting in your search, and that now at least you have a kind of hopefully basic understanding of the many different terms that you might encounter on that site. All right, before I get into this, I did see some things popping up in chat. I don't know, Carmen, if there's anything you want to jump in with questions at this point.
No, I just want to reassure everybody that technology permitting, a recording will be available on the APSIA YouTube page after this event. So feel free to take notes, ask great questions, but all of this will be available to remind you later on online.
Great, thank you. All right, so I'm going to play a very brief video. It's just about a minute long. That's going to give you a quick snapshot of what Young Professionals Program is. The audio is a little bit quiet on it. There are closed captions, so that should help. Or if you want to just kind of get prepared and bump up the volume on your devices. But also just to let you know that this video is available on our website as well.
Hello and welcome to the United Nations Young Professionals Program introduction video. The UN Young Professionals Program is a recruitment initiative for talented, highly qualified professionals to start a career as an international civil servant with the UN Secretariat. It consists of an entrance examination process and professional development once those successful start their career with the UN. Each year, countries that are un- or underrepresented in the United Nations are invited to take part in YPP. Only nationals of those countries are eligible to apply for the exam. In order to be eligible to apply, you need to hold the nationality of a participating country, must have at least a first-level university degree relevant for the exam, a relevant bachelor's degree or a 3-year equivalent degree, be 32 years old or younger in the year of the examination, and be fluent in either English or French. The YPP exams are held once a year in different subject areas depending on the needs of the UN. The application period typically opens in June each year. And finally, candidates that are successful in the YPP exam process will be placed on a roster, which is used to fill entry-level professional vacancies across the UN Secretariat over a 3-year period. For more information, please visit the YPP Careers page at careers.un.org/YPP and follow the official UN Careers pages on social media.
All right, so that really covers everything. So we're going to get into a little bit more detail on each of those dimensions.
Hello and
as we kind of talk a little bit more today, but as I mentioned, that video is available on our site, careers.un.org/YPP. It's under the What is YPP on the main page. So feel free to share that 1-minute video with your friends, colleagues, neighbors. We really do think that it gives you a quick overview of what to expect, and hopefully it then just gives you interest to find out a little bit more. So we're going to go into some more details about the application process, the assessment process, and then the roster placement and selection process. There are a lot of intricacies to make sure that you understand about YPP. It is a very, very unique opportunity to be able to join the UN through this, but it is not by any means a guarantee, and it is a very difficult or competitive process, I should say. So this slide is probably the one that has the most important information for you to kind of digest and remember. Not that you need to memorize anything, it's all on our site. But this includes just the 4 basic eligibility criteria. So there's nationality, age, education, and language. As mentioned in the video, each year, member states that are un- or underrepresented within the UN are invited to participate. So basically what that means is that we are looking to help balance out the representation among the different countries that are part of the UN in terms of balancing out the staff across the UN. We want to really, through YPP, improve that the balance of representation status across the different countries that are member states within the UN. So for these upcoming exams for 2021, there are 60 un- or underrepresented countries that are invited to participate. I did not try and put all 60 on a slide here. Just know that if you do go to our site, on the main page for careers.un.org/YPP, we should keep track of how many times I say that site. On that first page there, you can scroll down and you'll see there's a map that has all of the 60 participating member states highlighted. So just scroll over your country that you are hold a nationality of, and you'll get to see if they are participating or not. It's an interesting mix of developed and developing countries that are participants. For example, the United States is participating, as it is typically underrepresented in terms of staff within the UN. And then we have Kiribati, so very small island nation in Asia Pacific region is unrepresented as well. So Obviously, very, very different in terms of the demographics across these 60 countries that are participating. So do just go ahead and take a look and see if your country is participating this year. The countries do change each year, again, based on their representation across the UN at that given time. So then age is our next basic eligibility criteria. The other kind of main mandate of YPP, it's right there in the name, is to help rejuvenate the workforce of the United Nations. So with that, candidates must be 32 or younger in order to participate. Now we get to education, and this is kind of unique for YPP. As I mentioned a little bit ago, for most professional level opportunities, you need to have a master's degree or advanced level degree. However, for YPP, candidates only need to have a first level bachelor's degree or its equivalent in a relevant area to the exam. And so we'll get to that in a little bit later in our presentation, but most likely things, programs within APSIA are going to fall into the relevant area if you were talking about international relations or any type of international program. But bachelor's or its equivalent is accepted for YPP as opposed to other types of roles at the UN. And then finally, language. So candidates must be fluent in either English or French in order to participate. Something that you really want to be cautious of when you are completing your application is recognizing and entering the accurate level of your fluency. So if you are able to work in a professional environment in either English or French, then you want to indicate that you are in fact fluent, because that is what is required to work, to be accepted into YPP. Now is really not the time to be humble about your language skills. If you're able to work in that language, then you want to go ahead and indicate that you are fluent in that language, and specifically in all 4 elements listed here. So you'll see in the application, it asks you about your fluency at each of those levels. One big takeaway from this slide you'll notice is that there is no work experience requirement for YPP. So as we talked about as well, for any other entry-level professional role across the UN, at least 2 years of work experience is required. But for YPP, since it is this unique program, you do not need to have work experience. That said, if you do have work experience, you definitely want to go ahead and include it in your application. The application process for the UN can be a little bit intimidating, but as long as you really take your time and know what all of the details and really commit to entering all of your detailed information, then it's really just fine. And additionally, we do have a 5-minute application guide video that helps give the do's and don'ts and some specific tips for applying to YPP that really can be relevant to applying to many different roles at the UN. I'm not going to play the video here since it is 5 minutes, but just know that it can also be found on our site, careers.un.org/YPP. There's a tab for application process. So you'll find the video there, and it is available in English or French, just like that other video as well. So you just really want to make sure that you are being cautious and taking your time and filling out your application. That quick video that we watched earlier said that typically the application process opens in June each year. Obviously, we have not been in typical years these last couple of years, so our application process for 2021 is actually going to be opening in November. So you have not missed it for this year. It is still to come. what we do encourage actually that if you are interested in applying for anything in the UN, that you just go ahead and create your candidate profile in Inspira. This will give you time to enter all of your basic information and all of the details on your education, languages, and experience. And then it could really be applied across any of your applications. So before I get into the details on the assessment process, just want to check in if there were any questions to be addressed about the eligibility criteria or applying.
Julie, we had one quick question about that. Alan was wondering whether current UN interns can apply to YPP or if there are rules that might prevent them from applying. Like you can't be already part of the UN system or something like that.
Right, good question. So there is a rule for interns in general at the UN that they must wait 6 months after leaving their internship to be able to be eligible for other roles. That said, because YPP is such a lengthy, structured process, that I would just recommend if anybody is interested, go ahead and apply because by the time we get to certain stages, the internship could very well be over and those 6 months will have elapsed. So really, I would say as a rule of thumb, if you're interested for anything in the UN and you're not sure, go ahead and apply. Worst that happens is you get screened out. There's no list that you're going to go on that will stop your other applications. So I would say go ahead and submit as you wish. And the YPP application is a little bit unique and it is a lengthier process than applying to other roles at the UN. Good question.
And as a quick follow-up, you may not know, but for the 6-month duration pause rule, would that also apply to consultants, just like it would to interns?
That is a good question. There are rules surrounding consultants and then being able to apply. I don't want to give a wrong answer, but all of that information would be available on the careers page for UN.
We have several questions about the application deadlines and all of those pieces, but I'm thinking we're going to get into that. So perhaps we can just dive right in.
Yes, absolutely. We certainly will get back to the timeline. So now we're going to talk a little bit about the assessment process. We've applied, took our time in our application, did a really thorough job, and are invited to participate. So again, individuals that meet those 4 basic eligibility criteria, they're going to be invited to participate in the process. There is a little caveat to that, I should say, and it is spelled out on our site, but for member states that have very high volume of applicants, there's a maximum of 60 individuals that can apply. So for example, if you have a US nationality or China or Brazil, those are very often the high volume nationality member states that we get the applications from. If you are from one of those places that has more than 60 applicants, then there is a screening to identify the top 60 that would be invited to participate in the assessment process. And that screening is or ranking is basically done based on individuals' education, experience, and languages. So the more education, the higher in the rank, more languages, higher in the rank, and likewise for experience. But that applies to very few member states, and again, it's spelled out on the website. So you have now met the basic eligibility criteria and you're invited to participate in the process. What does this mean? So it means that you're going to go through a rigorous assessment process, which has been broken down into several stages, though, to help kind of ease the burden on candidates a little bit and really make it a slightly more user-friendly and modern experience. So the exam process for those that are first invited to stage 1 will typically be around 2-hour multiple choice exam. It's available in either English or French. And it consists of what we call general and specialized questions. So there's a mix of a focus on competencies, skills, and abilities that are relevant across areas and critical to work in an international organization, coupled with questions that are really focused on the substantive area of the exam. So this is, again, the kind of the first screening, the first stage of the assessment. And for the individuals that succeed in this first stage of the exam, they would be invited to participate in the second stage. You can picture this as a big funnel, really, from application down to the last stage that we have here. We're narrowing down the pool of candidates. So it is just, a certain percentage of those that participate in the first stage would be invited to participate in the second stage. That's where we get a little bit deeper into the subject area. So the second stage of the online exam focuses in on that specialized or substantive area that is specific to the exam. It consists of what we call constructed response items or open-ended questions. So you're given a scenario and background information, and you're asked to draft talking points or make a recommendation, put together a project plan. It's very, very performance-based and linked very closely to the types of tasks that you would encounter on the job. These questions, again, are offered in English and French, and typically this stage is going to be proctored remotely. So for none of the stages of the exam is travel required. Everything is moved to online examination, and we do really ensure the integrity of the test through this proctored platform. And then finally, for those that succeed in stage 2, again, that funnel, though narrowing down, candidates are invited to participate in the interview stage, and that is typically a competency-based video interview. I do see a lot of questions popping up, but before I get to them, I want to get a little bit more information out about the assessment process. So hopefully I didn't scare you too much with all of the details about the assessment process, just to maybe set nerves at ease a little bit. You should just know that candidates that are invited to participate in the YPP exam, first off, they will receive access to the UN online examinations and test system. This is our online testing platform. And with access to this platform, candidates will, first of all, be able to test their connection and equipment, make sure that everything works well, familiarize themselves with navigating in the platform, and really more than anything, be able to prepare themselves. So we offer as much preparation material as we can to candidates to really make sure that there is an even playing field and that everyone has access to the same kinds of materials and really knows what they are getting into with the test. So we provide suggested reading lists really to help you be more focused in looking for sources that you'll want to read up on. We give sample questions. We like to put preparation videos. So really try and arm the candidates with as much material as possible to really help prepare yourself, because it is a very competitive process. We want to make sure that you are taking it seriously and really taking the time to study. So in terms of the timeline, typically it will take a few months after the application closes for screening to take place. And then once you are informed that you are invited to participate in the process, there's still another couple months before the test itself will be administered, so that you do have additional time to really prepare and study in advance of the exam. All of that said, I want to put this big warning slide up. There are for-profit companies that we are aware of that like to present themselves as part of the UN or having UN insider information. You just really want to be careful about paying any entity for help in preparing for YPP, because as I said, we really do give all of the guidance and preparation materials to candidates at no charge. And these companies are not supported or endorsed by the UN in any way. So just really be cautious about any promises that you hear about UN insider information or anything like that. All right, so I'll go ahead and pause here to see what kind of questions we have about the assessment process, and I'll go back to this slide.
So Julie, there's several questions about when it's conducive for folks to apply. You mentioned that there's an extra boost for students who've already completed their graduate degree. So should students who are going to be completing their graduate degree in 22 compete now in November, knowing how long the process takes, or should they wait until after they've finished? There was also a question about whether the YPP opens every year. And so if students who are not graduating until 23 when they should think about applying.
Exactly. So yes, YPP does take place every year. The exam areas or subject areas that are offered do change each year. And I'll go into some more details about that. Great questions. So you can, I would say, if you are interested in YPP, go ahead and apply during this upcoming application period. You can still apply in the next application period for 2022 and then 2023, as long as you still meet the eligibility criteria. There's no impact of your application from one year to the next year's application. So if you have applied for the 2020 exams, for example, and you were not invited, you can still apply in 2021. We don't look across the different years. We're really focused on that individual year because the subject areas are different each year. Likewise, if you're already participating in the 2020 exams, you can still participate in the 2021. So just another way to explain that one year's application does not impact the next year's application or the previous year's application. So a little bit more about the subject areas and how kind of the cycle of YPP happens each year. So as I had mentioned at the very beginning, there are these different job networks or families of jobs across the UN. And in order to kind of better prepare ourselves with workforce planning, YPP is offered for different job families each year, but they do go through a cycle because there's kind of a limit of the number of job networks that we're looking to fill positions in. So, for example, the 2020 exams were offered in 3 areas. It was management and administration, political affairs and human rights, and global communications. So 3 pretty big, substantial areas. In 2021, I'll go ahead and give a little spoiler, even though we'll get to there later. There's going to be exams offered in social affairs, so social policy and development, and statistics, kind of covering statistics and a little bit of data analytics as well. And then likely in 2022, there could be legal affairs. And so each year it will cover slightly different areas of job families or job networks, but they do cycle through. Because in the video you will have seen that the YPP is used to create a roster that's used to fill vacancies over a period of 3 years. We essentially work on a 3-year cycle. It varies a little bit, but more or less, if management and administration was offered in 2020, the next time that area would be offered would be 2023. So we go through this cycle, and each year the exam areas are different, and 1 year's application does not impact another year's application. So there's really no right or wrong time to apply. If you meet the eligibility criteria, you can go ahead and apply. If you don't make it and you still meet the eligibility criteria the next year, then go ahead and try again.
We have several other questions that I know you will cover once we let you keep moving with the presentation, but I did want to sharpen one quick piece. You mentioned the 60 applicant threshold for large countries. And I was wondering if you could just repeat that again, because I know there's a number of students on the line who may fall into the citizenship of a large country like PRC or the US. So if you could just repeat that really quickly to make sure everyone understands.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the way that works is to help ensure as equitable a process as we can, because there are these many small island member states and just other member states that don't have even enough citizens to create a high volume of applicants. There is this kind of maximum number of individuals per member state per exam area that are allowed to participate. So for those where we receive high volumes of applications, we limit it to what we call the top 60. And again, that top 60 is per member state and also per exam area. So if you're applying to the social affairs exam, there are a maximum of 60 US nationals, for example, but then also separately in the statistics exam, there would be a maximum of 60 US nationals as an example. The way that we calculate it, it's largely done through the automated system of recognizing the different languages that you have indicated your fluency or knowledge in, whether you have an advanced degree, that would be kind of additional points that would help bump up your ranking, and whether you do have relevant work experience. So again, the basic eligibility criteria was that no work experience is required, but for those member states that have high volumes, then often work experience can come into play. Work experience can include internships, part-time work. They would just all be calculated slightly differently, again, through the automated system. You know, for example, an internship would be counted at half time as a full-time work experience would. So similar to if you have part-time work experience. All of that, I would say the main tip to take away from that is to really make sure that you are taking time when you're completing the application to be as thorough and descriptive as you can. Make sure that you are including, for example, one of the tips in the application video is make sure that you're including in the application your mother tongue or your native language. A lot of times we see individuals whose native language is English, not indicating that they are fluent in English on their application. And so then they would be automatically screened out. So you take your time, watch the video, really read through the application, carefully and enter all of the relevant information. All of that is going to help to make sure that you're accurately ranked in reaching that top 60.
Thank you so much for that. And I see a number of other questions in the chat that I strongly suspect are on your future slides. So we'll let you keep going.
All right, sounds good. So now I just kind of wanted to talk a little bit about what's the outcome of this rigorous assessment process. So we've talked about application, we've talked about the assessment process. And so those who are successful in the overall YPP examination process are placed on a roster that's used to fill vacancies over the course of 3 years. So this was mentioned in the video, and I really want to emphasize it as much as I can here, that it's all about managing expectations. Applying to YPP is not the same as applying to different jobs at the UN, in that there's not one specific opening at the end of the process. What YPP is a way, as I said earlier, to help the workforce planning and help ensure that we have this roster of individuals that are pre-approved and at the ready to be selected for a vacancy, to be selected into a position as it opens up. So I've seen it happen that candidates are selected off of the roster and into a position, you know, a month after they're successful and added onto the roster, or it might be, you know, 3 years down the road when an appropriate vacancy opens up and that individual is selected, or of course, anytime in between there. So applying to YPP is really more about investing in a possible future career at the UN. It's not about, I need a job now, I'm going to apply to YPP, and then I'm going to start working for the UN. First of all, there's of course no guarantee of employment, but it's really also, as I said, it's about a long-term way that we're able to fill positions in the UN. So you really just want to manage your expectations and don't go quitting your job if you pass YPP. It's something that will take time, but it really, if you are interested in having a long-term career at the UN, then YPP is a really nice way to be able to do so, because candidates, when they are selected off of the roster and offered a position, you're offered a 2-year fixed term contract. And then following those 2 years, depending on performance, that contract would then be transitioned to what we call a continuing contract. All of this is to say it's a way to have a really nice stable career at the UN, because there is so much that goes into the assessment process. We know that the candidates that come out of it are really quality, and it's just a really nice way to be able to start your career. Also, I want to point out that candidates should be prepared to accept a position across the different duty stations at the UN. So it's all of the main UN Secretariat offices that are listed here, can be found on the site, that candidates should be willing to go to. There's a small percentage of folks that might be offered a role in a field mission, a peacekeeping mission, but most of the YPP posts are in these main UN duty stations. And so again, candidates must be open to taking the role that they are offered. And then let's see. Let me just talk a little bit about this year's process, and then we can talk about questions about kind of the outcome and placement and everything. So I had already kind of shown my hand earlier and gave you the sneak peek of what the exam areas are that will be upcoming, as well as a little bit of the time frame. So as I said, each year the exam areas will change. So the upcoming ones will be focused on social affairs and statistics. You can find out more about these specific job families by going onto the careers page on the UN, and there are pages on there about the different job networks, and you can kind of familiarize yourself with what these roles might entail in advance of the application period. But in the job opening itself, it will have more details about what does social affairs mean at the UN and what does statistics mean at the UN, so you can know, am I actually interested in this type of role? But you can do some research in advance and find out about these roles. The application period will be open for a period of 60 days. So I anticipate that it will be November through December. It might kind of roll into the next year a little bit as well. There is an applicant chatbot that we have now in Inspira. That's our application system. So you can ask some questions about YPP to the chatbot, and hopefully they can help answer your questions that way. But really just kind of want to emphasize again that if you are interested in YPP or anything else with the UN, you would want to go ahead and start making your profile and getting all the details entered about your education, experience, languages, all of that information in there. Make sure that you're watching the applicant guide video. One thing that I do want to point out about the video actually is the look and feel of Inspira has very recently changed. So the look and feel of the screenshots of Inspira in that video are going to be slightly different from what you see. It's getting more and more user-friendly, which is a great thing, but that video will need to be updated. But in terms of the content and the tips, all of it is still relevant. So just want to put up here, once again, that site that you want to go to is careers.un.org/YPP. Inspira is that application process system. You can get to it from the careers page as well. And as mentioned in that video, you want to follow the official UN careers pages on social media. So I'm going to go back a couple of slides to that roster placement and selection and see where our questions are taking us.
Thanks so much, Julie, again. My question, and we have some wonderful ones in the chat too that I know you've touched on a little bit, so we'll unpack those with the time we have. But for something like social affairs and statistics, is it critical that someone's degree have those words in them, or are there other ways that they can demonstrate a depth of knowledge in something like statistics through their highly stats data-based international affairs degree, for example?
Yeah, great question. So the job opening is going to spell out exactly what we call them in the system, the main courses of study or fields of study. So it's going to spell out exactly what is accepted in terms of the fields of the degree, or kind of your focus of your degree. So as I mentioned earlier, international relations, international affairs, those are likely to be relevant and accepted across the different exam areas. Certainly social affairs, it would be. You'll just want to really pay careful attention to, again, what is listed in the job opening in terms of what's accepted. We do touch upon this in the application tips video as well, whereas your title of degree, right now, so many degree titles are very, very customized. And so you will likely not find it in a pull down menu in our application system. So you just want to really select that degree area that is most relevant and most accurate to what you have studied or what you're studying. And hopefully it does in fact line up with what's listed out in the job opening. So yeah, you don't need to specifically have a degree in social affairs or only a degree in statistics, there is a wider range of fields of study that are accepted, and they will be spelled out in the job opening.
Thank you. And I know we have a number of questions and not a lot of time. One question about what counts in terms of number of years of experience. So when assessing an application, can you unpack a little bit more what counts as half-time? Is that internships and consultancies? What's full-time, and how that whole works?
Yeah. So we'll start with full-time experience. It's really about relevant experience as well. I want to put that caveat in. So if you work full-time, you know, as a food server, for example, that is not going to count towards the years of experience. But if you worked full-time in something related to statistics, then that would count full-time. Or if you had an internship at an international organization, or an internship with a focus on doing data analysis work, then the system will calculate that at half-time. Research through graduate studies, you'll want to enter that in as well. You know, if you're working in a lab, those will also get calculated at kind of different percentages. But I would say not to get too hung up on trying to determine for yourself if you know, what level of years experience or how many years of experience you have. It's really what you should be focusing on is being accurate and making sure you're putting in the details of how your experience is relevant to that exam area. So you want to be descriptive as well about the work. Very often we see applicants that just write "see resume" in the text box that describes their work experience. And that's not very helpful, and that's not going to help, you know, in their ranking to say, oh yes, this was relevant experience. So I know it's tedious and takes time to really fill out and each individual application for each organization that you're applying to. But if you really are interested in working with the UN, like I said, take the time to create a profile, enter in all of those details once, and then you'll be able to carry that information over to the next time you apply for something with the UN. So really just make sure that you're being descriptive and explaining how the experience that you had is relevant to that exam area. And then we'll do the rest in terms of the calculation. And Carmen, I'm happy to stay on a little bit longer and answer a few more questions.
Thank you so much. A lot of the questions that we have in the chat are about this, what happens after you've been selected. So you've touched a little bit about the roster, you've touched a little bit about being open to any duty station worldwide, but could you talk a little bit about what kinds of roles YPP might take on so students would know a little bit what they're getting into?
Yeah, good question. So yeah, we have on this slide that candidates would be offered a P1 or P2 level. So more acronyms that don't necessarily mean anything, but we talked a little bit about at the beginning about the P2, and essentially what that means is the entry level for professionals. So typically we don't see P1 positions. So let's really focus in on P2 is the entry level professional. And so if we're talking about what type of job and what type of role, it's certainly it's a team member level, it's individual contributor, if you want to think about it that way. You're going to be working with more senior officers. If we're talking about social affairs and statistics, a lot of them could be conducting research that would help with policy recommendations, or you know, helping to advise different member states on on different policies or on their progress on certain activities. So it's really substantive, meaningful work, and it's being able to really contribute and start your career at a professional level with the UN. So we do in the job opening itself, we'll give some more descriptions about the types of roles that you can expect. And I would really encourage everyone, as well as I had mentioned, to go ahead onto the careers page on UN and look into the different job networks, and you can read more about the types of roles that are offered within those job networks, just to kind of get an understanding of what you might see in the job opening.
Last two questions for you. The first one is whether YPP also comes with opportunities for professional development or mentorship or some of those pieces outside of the regular job duties.
Yeah, so what's unique about YPP is that there's kind of a special feel of a cohort. So as you see on this, vacancies are filled over a course of 3 years. So it's not the same as a management development or rotational program where you might have the 2021 cohort and everyone is coming in together and going down this path and journey at the same time. So YPP is different in that people are going to be joining at different points in time, but it's still there still will be opportunities where let's say all of the YPPs who joined over the last 6 months will get together for a development session, or they'll get together for a training. More likely now they will join online for a virtual training together, but there is a community sense amongst the YPP staff, and there are mentoring opportunities that are offered. It's not necessarily unique to YPP, though. A lot of the career development and mentoring and information is offered across many different roles within the UN, but that sense of community across YPP staff is definitely there.
Wonderful. And thank you so much for all this extra time. My very last question, you've talked at length about how, yes, students can apply year on year, but each year it's going to vary based on the categories of candidates you're looking for and the countries that you're looking for, but also really the strength of their Inspira profile. Is there anything else that you would encourage students to do, or importantly, not do in their Inspira profile that will help our folks really make sure that they shine in that computer system?
Good question. I mean, I think that the big issues that we say, I know you asked about what's going to help them shine, so I'll think about that as I kind of reemphasize the what not to do. You want to make sure that you are being descriptive. I think that will help you shine. So you don't want to write in C resume. You want to make sure that you're being descriptive and really making a linkage, just as you would, if you were speaking to someone to explain to them, this research that I did is relevant for the work in the UN, because you want to go ahead and really put that information in there to help you shine. You want to make sure that you are accurately reflecting your language skills. So again, you don't want to be humble. You don't want to forget your native language. Go ahead and put in whatever your mother tongue is. All of this are in the tips for the application video. The other things, just to really kind of help build your profile, I would say, is making sure that you are getting exposure to different public sector organizations, if you can. Get exposure to international organizations, if you can. If you're able to have an internship with the UN, that would certainly help improve your application, but also really help for yourself to understand, is this an organization that I want to invest more time in? So really try and I would say just kind of enhance your exposure to different types of international organizations or public sector organizations. Really do take some time as well. I had mentioned the UN Common System. Familiarize yourself with that and see maybe YPP Secretariat is not for you, but there are actually young professional programs at other UN Common Systems as well. So UNICEF, World Bank, many different agencies and programs have their different YPP offerings. So just make sure that you are broadening your horizons in terms of your own experience, but also what you might be looking for and what you are open to.
Wonderful. And with that, I want to thank you so much, Julie, for sharing all of this great wisdom. I want to thank all of our students and staff for being a part of this conversation. And I hope that you all will think very deeply about the quality and spirit profile you can construct for YPP and other UN opportunities. And we look forward to seeing you at future APSIA webinars. For those who are curious, yes, this recording will be available on the APSIA YouTube page as soon as technology will let me get it up there. And the website for that is simply youtube.com/APSIATube. So thanks to all of you for being a part of this conversation. And Julie, thank you so much again for sharing all of this great wisdom and insight with our students today. Have a great rest of your day, everyone, wherever in the world you happen to find yourself. Thank you.
Take care.